All right, well, today we are going to talk about two chapters, chapters 8 and chapters 10. We are not studying chapter 9 in this class, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So this is all about communication. Okay, so this is an overview of the different parts of communication that we're going to study. Okay, so these are 4 questions I want you to ask yourself to reflect back on throughout this presentation about your mobile devices, how to communicate in different situations, if you listen more than you talk, and research projects and essays and your experience with this. Okay, I like this quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that has taken place. So sometimes you think you're communicating effectively when in essence, you're not. You probably have a situation in the past where you thought you were saying one thing and got totally misconstrued, maybe even started a fight between you and an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend or a friend. Okay, so by the time we finish today's lesson, you're going to articulate the different types of communication, the forms and purpose of it, how technology has changed communication, various contexts and barriers to effective communication. Okay, so hopefully you have thought a little bit, maybe even through reading this chapters, what are the different ways that you communicate, or what are your preferences in communication? And do you think about what the variables are in a situation before you choose your method of communication? Okay, so 2 different types of communication. Information that's exchanged between people through behavior, signs, symbols, or it's the process of giving, receiving, or exchanging ideas. Okay, technology has definitely created a whole new chapter for communication and different rules, and that's more generational. So your generation has a lot more technology-based rules that you have kind of grown up with, and for my generation, we had to kind of learn as they were being developed. Okay, so it's important to choose how you communicate with somebody and where you communicate with someone based on the situation. So, for example, you need to think about who you're talking to, why you're talking to them, and what do you want to achieve as a result. So, for example, you might talk differently to your friends than you would a potential supervisor. Okay, whereas you might send a Snapchat to one of your friends, you're probably not sending a Snapchat about a job interview to a potential supervisor, right? So that's a different modality of how you would speak to somebody in a different context, right? Or let's say you had a boyfriend and girlfriend and you were thinking about breaking up with them and wanted to do that effectively. You probably want to do that in person. You probably don't want to put a sticky note and say, I'm breaking up with you, and put it on their car, right? So those are both ways to communicate, but there's a time and place and method of communication that is effective based on what's going on. Okay, so communication, is a two-way street. You need to listen as well. And it's important to know the difference between hearing somebody and listening to somebody. I remember when I was in grad school, I had a boyfriend and we would talk on the phone. And at night, I'd be talking to him and I would hear in the background, da-na-na, da-na-na. And for any of you out there who are sports fan, that's the ESPN kind of jingle. And I knew that whenever I heard that in the background, my ex-boyfriend may have been hearing me, but he may not have been listening to me. Okay, so there is a difference. So being a good listener takes a lot of practice. As I said, it's not just hearing what they say, but it's actively being a part of that conversation, even though you might not be speaking. So this is through body language, it's through your mannerisms. You need to know when to give advice, when to just listen, and kind of be a good friend. And so it takes a lot of practice to do that. Okay, so almost everything you do is a part of communication. Even if it's listening to an ad, you are hearing and listening and maybe making or comprehending what the advertisers want you to hear. They are communicating to you through TikTok or through a TV show. So it's still communication. So you want to make sure that you think about, like I said before, how you want to communicate to get the, result that you want. And think about the verbal and nonverbal responses. Okay. This Mark Twain quote says the difference between the right word and the almost right word. It's the difference between lightning and lightning bug, right? So it's almost the right word, but it gives a really different connotation. Okay. Section 8.3 of the chapter talks about communication and technology. And so we are going to talk about what rules there are to follow when there's technology communication occurring. And how do you be the best online communicator you can be? Okay, one aspect of online communication is something called netiquette or etiquette on the internet. Okay. This is something that I try to help students with a lot when it has to do with how to communicate with professors. You want to make sure that you are giving as much information as possible, and that you're polite and that you're timely when you're communicating with professors. You address them by their proper title. So you want to make sure that you think before you send an email or a message to a faculty member. So for example, in this class, I've gotten emails through Canvas that say something like, I need help with the assignment. I'm like, okay, which assignment are you referring to? How can I be of help? So you don't want to make the professor follow up with questions that you should have cleared up in the original message, right? When you're emailing professors, you want to make sure that they know your full name, what class you're in. You want to say something nice to them. That's all great things to do when you're, especially if you're trying to ask for a favor. All caps, makes it look like you're yelling. Don't do that. Definitely don't put down anybody when you're emailing, because you never know where that's going to go. Apologize if you need to. You want to make sure that if you have an opinion that you are using, my humble opinion, that's not for a professor, but that's like more for friends. You need to know that if you're communicating on the, an email or internet, they can't read your body language. So you might need to be a little more expressive about how you're feeling, and be respectful above all else. You want to control your online communication. These are 5 ways to take control. So you want to make sure that you are aware of everything going on around you. And you want to know your level of familiarity and participation. How are you responding to things? Collaboration, network awareness, and critical conception. These are all ways that we can consider our use and consumption of media. So these are the 5 different literacy areas that you might think that you are doing well at, or, maybe some more help. So you might want to kind of look and see which ones you think you excel in. Okay. Talk about following different social media influencers, about their impact. You want to make sure that you aren't impacted too much from them, that you know how to think critically yourself about what is important to you, and not just do something because someone else tells you that that's what they're into. Okay, so communication has changed because of technology. We have less nonverbal cues because they can't see nonverbal cues unless you are doing a Zoom call or something like that. During phone conversations, you can't see hand gestures, so that's another limitation. And then in text messages, there's no tone of voice, and so things might be misconstrued. These are some ways to get connected on how to help you if you think you need some assistance in netiquette or online communication. Okay, 8.4 is the context of communication. Think about how communication may change in certain situations. Do you speak differently when talking to different people? And what role does listening play in communication? Um, Different situations call for different ways to talk. I remember I was talking to a different ex-boyfriend, so they're all exes, if you can catch that. And he was talking about how, why should I talk to you differently than I talk to my friends? And I'm like, because you shouldn't talk to me the same way you talk to your guys, or your boys, right? It's like a different, and so he just was not being the, you know, uh, best partner he could be in his communication to me. And so he just didn't get that. And so we broke up. Um, so what type of career you're in, your work environment, um, your communication style is going to change, right? So if you're in class, your communication is going to change, and how talk to someone than if you are playing an intramural game, right? It's going to be different because you're in a different environment. Think about what you want to say and why you want to say it, and think twice about the most appropriate way for you to talk, and reflect on who you're going to talk to before you speak. Emotional intelligence is another really important concept when it comes to communication. It's how well you can recognize your own emotions and how you can perceive others' emotions. So a lot of times we don't focus on how we're receiving messages. We just think about how we are saying messages. So it's important that you're thinking about both receiving and talking or communicating when you're talking about this two-way street action. Okay, misconceptions. Um, there are some times when you might not think that you're doing something inappropriate, but it is. I remember teaching one time, and this young man had a t-shirt, and he had a t-shirt with a saying on it, and it said, "Drink until you like me." And I was like, I really don't want to, right? But like when I'm teaching, that's like what I'm seeing on this shirt as I'm trying to teach. So you want to make sure that you are careful about what you choose to wear. I know it's freedom of speech, but there's what you can wear when you go out with your friends, and then what you should wear when you're in the classroom, which is just a form of respect to faculty members. You should also dress for the job you want, not the one you have. So I always say it's better to overdress than underdress. And you've probably heard of the expression dress to impress. Okay, so these are the four terms that I want, or statements I want you to think about at the beginning. And hopefully you've thought a little bit more about that throughout this presentation. And that is the end of chapter 8. Okay, so we're now going to go into chapter 10. Okay. Chapter 10 is all about financial literacy, something that we all like because it's about money, right? All right, these are the different parts of the outline. Okay, 4 questions I want you to think about. How do you monitor your finances? What are the benefits and risks of credit? A little bit more about financial student loans and how to protect your identity. So these are the 4 things that we're going to be talking about. Okay, so how to manage your finances wisely. Hopefully you've started planning or have thought a little bit about how you're going to plan to have good financial management. Hopefully you have a saving and a spending plan, that you have some sort of emergency plan as well. You have a little more information about credit cards and what other debt means and how you're going to manage that. How you're going to pay for college, and how you're going to secure your identity in any accounts that you have. Okay, so things I want you to reflect on. What steps you need to have in order to create a financial plan? How can you use financial planning in everyday life? And what is the process for purchasing items? Okay, so there's 5 steps in financial planning: goal setting, evaluating, planning, implementing, and monitoring. Here is a little image about that. So hopefully you have a goal. Let's say you want to buy a new car. Okay. What are some alternative solutions for your current situation? You're like, okay, well, how much does it cost right now to Uber, or what are my public transportation options, right? What is the plan with cost and a timeline? How much is this car? How are you going to work to save up for it? How long is that going to take? And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to implement that plan. Maybe you have to, do 5 more hours a week of work to save up for it. And that's going to take you 5 months for, the first payment. And then, throughout those months, you're going to monitor, how well you're doing. And then hopefully that means you met your goal. And then if that didn't work, then you have your goal. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to measure the flow of your money and how what that means, and how do you keep things balanced, because you don't want to just save and never spend anything. You need some give and take. Okay. And Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in America, says, do not save what's left after spending, spend what's left after saving. So your first goal should be saving money for an emergency fund, or maybe saving for that car, like in that previous situation, and then spend what's left over. You shouldn't spend first and then save money. You want to do it the other way around. Okay, so there's 3 different ways for your budget. There's income. So that's money from a job or maybe an allowance, something like that. There's saving and investing, which could be retirement planning, an emergency fund, savings account, certificate deposit, Roth IRA, something like that. And expenses, that's your rent, electricity, internet, phone, insurance, all of that. So when you have income, you have to figure out, what am I putting where, right? So it's important to have a budget so you know how much money you have and what you can put in both of those different pockets. Okay, so earnings, savings, and investments build up your assets. It's important to start saving for retirement early. And some of you may be thinking, I don't even want to think about retirement. You might be 19 years old, 18 years old. But I'll tell you a little story. When I was 21, my father gave me some great advice, and he said he wanted me to open up a Roth IRA, which is a retirement account that allows you to have compound interest, which means that when interest gets generated, it gets reinvested, and then you're making interest off your interest and your income, so it keeps on compounding to be bigger, bigger, bigger. So I put in $16,000 between the time I was 21 and 30. That $16,000 is now about $140,000 because of compound interest. So the earlier you start is going to exponentially grow. And so when you're my age, you're going to be really glad that you did that when you were younger. Even just putting in like $1,000 a year can make a huge difference later on in life. And something with the Roth IRA, you can take out up to $10,000 to buy a house, because that's a eligible expense, or to for schooling. And then you can take out the principal, which is the amount of money that you put in, without penalty. Even though it's a retirement account, you can take out money for legitimate expenses before then. So highly recommend it. Okay. Tracking the big picture. You want to make sure that you know how your money is, growing, and how much you're spending. That's a really important skill set to have. And the more you borrow or debt, That's going to increase your liability. That's going to lower your credit score. So your net worth is how much you own versus how much you owe. That's your net worth. Okay, so hopefully it's a positive number. Okay, here are some great websites to get you started on financial money management. Mint is a great one, so I highly recommend if you want to dive deeper into the subject area that you check out one of these sites. Okay, we talked about an emergency fund. They say you should have 2 months of salary saved up in a savings account just in case. You get laid off, you get injured, you can't work, something happens, right? And so it's important to know where to put this money. So if you don't have a bank, we have the Additions Financial Credit Union on campus. That is a great one to go to if you need a bank to start off with. It's right on campus, so it's easy for you if you are a on-campus student. Okay, so emergency funds. You always need a plan for the unplanned. Maybe your card's going to break down, something like that. So the emergency fund, like it says here, is a cash reserve, is there for emergencies. You should separate this from other money. Maybe have like a savings account and a checking account, so you're not tempted to spend out of your savings account. Talk about doing it for 2 months, and pizza, unfortunately, is not an emergency. Okay, I'd have a talk with my teenage daughter because I gave her I let her be an authorized user on my credit card and gave her own credit card for emergencies. And I saw Chick-fil-A and Chipotle come up on my account. And I'm like, Madison? And she's like, well, I was hungry. I'm like, we have food at home. That's not an emergency. So I had to have a really stern talk with her about what is an emergency and what is not an emergency. And so you need to make sure that you do that for yourself as well. So whatever you think your emergency dollar amount is, like I said, 2 months salary is a good one. It's important to have, set aside. How are you going to add to it? Do you have a percentage that you want to put towards it? And start it now if you haven't started. Just like the Roth IRA, start it now, please. Talk about credit unions already, so that's a good option for you if you don't already have another bank account with Bank of America, Truist, Chase, something like that. At a bank, there's different types of accounts you can have. You have a checking account, savings account. Checking account is like a debit account. You probably have a debit card. You may not have checks, even though it's called a checking account. Debit card means that you need money in your account in order for it to be taken out. But a credit card, you don't necessarily need the money in order to spend it. We'll talk about that later. Banking fees. Sometimes most banks don't charge for a checking account anymore. Some will charge if it's, if you want checks along with your checking account, but it's minimal fee. Some banks are fully online and only have mobile banking, and they're virtual banks like Discover Banks, as an example. I personally prefer to have a bank that has a brick and mortar store that I can go into if I need to, especially if I have a check I need to deposit and I don't have the option to deposit a check on the app. That's important to me. And savings accounts typically allow you to earn more interest than a checking account, and compounding interest would be for things like a Roth IRA or a certificate of deposit. Okay, credit cards and other debt. We're going to talk about student loans, dangerous debt, and what you should think about when getting a credit card. Okay, so compounding interest is great. However, you want to make sure that by taking out student loans now and using it for things that are kind of, frivolous now, you don't want to sacrifice your future fund, and, because you have to pay them back someday. My brother took out a student loan so that he can go on a week-long cruise during spring break. He took out a student loan for a spring break cruise. He rationalized it by saying it's cheaper or it's better to take out a student loan than to put it on my credit card. But no, you should just not go on the cruise in the first place if you don't have the money to do it. But that wasn't something that he was thinking about. So now he took out a student loan in college. Let's say it's a 5% interest rate. If it is a unsubsidized loan, that means that the minute you take out that loan, you're getting charged interest. So if he's a sophomore in college and he takes out $1,000 loan, he then owes $1,040, after that first year. And then it keeps on compounding and compounding and compounding that interest level, so that you're owing a lot more than what you took out later on in life. So when it says future fund, if you have a student loan bill you have to pay off every month, you may not be able to have as many fun expenses when you're older because you kind of wasted your money when you're younger. Good debt is good, especially if things like a mortgage or maybe a car payment, because if you can prove that you can pay back a loan in full every month on time, you're showing that you are a good prospect to future creditors and that you're a good risk for them. So your credit score will go up the more you pay off things on time in full every month, because it's showing that you are a responsible person. So that will increase your credit score. Okay, so these are some signs you might have too much debt. If you can't make your minimum credit card payment, not even talking about in full, usually it's a very small percentage you have to pay back as a minimum every month. You might have too much debt. You can't let your bank will go into the red, or your bouncing checks. Bouncing checks means that you may overdraft your account before your next paycheck comes in. You start getting calls from bill collectors. You can't get a loan because your credit score is so low. You get garnished, which means that money gets taken out of your paycheck before you see it, because the federal government allows that. You're thinking about going to AMSCOT or something like that to get short-term money. You're getting repossessed, or you have no idea what your financial situation is. Okay, so a credit card can be a good thing if used responsibly. This means that you have a credit card that you pay off every month and you're not maxing it out. So that gives you a good credit score. So a credit score can go from all the way up to 850. 850 is the top you can get in a credit score. And the more time and the more good behavior you have in your credit, the higher it's going to go throughout the years. So use your credit card. I always say only buy things that you know you're going to be able to pay off, right? You don't want to charge it without a plan on how you're going to pay it off. Credit card when you're adult are great because you can get things like airline miles or cashback rewards or other, hotel points, things like that. It's a great way to kind of get rewarded for using that form of payment. So I spend almost everything I can on my one credit card because I like to get airline miles for it. And that's how I can fund trips and things like that. So what to look for in your initial credit card, you want a low annual payment fee or a no annual payment fee. Discover tends to be the first card a lot of people get. That was my first card I got when I was 18 because they tend to be a little more, it's a little easier to get a credit card with Discover than perhaps an American Express Platinum card, right? So you want to start small. Maybe you have a limit of $500 or $1,000 you could spend without maxing out. As you build up history with that credit card, your maximum amount that you can charge is going to increase month after month after month because they want you to spend money. The credit card companies don't want you to pay off every month because they want to charge you interest so they make money off of that, right? So you want to make sure to outsmart them though and to actually kind of fool them and get the benefits of those airline miles, whatever you tend to do. All right, so when you're faced with whether or not to take on student debt or not, I always say if the only way that you can pay for college is by taking out student loans, take out student loans, right? You're going to have a better trajectory of life if you have a college education. And so if the only way for you to get a college education is to take out a student loan, do it, okay? Um, so how do you match debt to postgraduate income? We're gonna have a slide on that about how much debt you should take on and what the negatives are about that, especially if you're not making very much money when you graduate. Subsidized versus unsubsidized loans. I talked a little bit about unsubsidized loans, which means that you get charged interest from the day you take it out. Subsidized loans means that the federal government's going to pay the interest for that loan until 6 months after you graduate. Okay, so 6 months after you graduate is when the interest starts being tacked on to the amount that you've loaned or been given as a loan. How to apply for financial aid? Go into Milliken Hall, talk to a financial aid counselor. That is the best way to figure it out. You have to do the FAFSA form early, and you need your family's contribution or income and tax returns to do that. It's not an easy process, so that's why I said go to financial aid and have them help you out. And repayment strategies. Definitely have a budget and try to pay off your student loans as quickly as possible is the best strategy. Okay. So as I said before, if taking out loans is how you're going to get a college education, you're investing in your own knowledge. Okay. If you want to be successful in college, you need to know how much it actually costs to go to college. Some students have no idea how much tuition is. They just think that their parents are going to do it for them. But it's important for you all to know how much you're paying for college. You need to be part of the process, even if you're not footing the bill. I'll tell you a very personal story that happened to me. When I was in college, my dad always told me to take out the max amount of student loans. And I would get a check from the financial aid office. I would then, sign it over to him. He would take the money and he just took care of my bill. I never knew how much college cost. I didn't know how much he was taking. Well, I figured out later on that he had me take out the full amount of loans because he wanted to reap the benefit of those loans, and he was making money off me going to college because I had some other scholarships and things like that. And so he was using the money from my student loans under my social security number in my name to live off of. Okay. And then I get this big bill for student loans, and I wasn't even the beneficiary of all those dollars. So you don't want to be like that. You want to know if it's in your name and your social security number, you need to know how that money is being spent. Okay. So you need to know how much you're paying for education. Because there are job market trends. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. You want to make sure you're working hard, right? Get a part-time job to help pay the bills. And also lower your needs. Maybe you don't need an iPhone. Maybe you can do okay with Android. Maybe you don't need a Netflix, Amazon, Paramount, Disney Plus subscription. Maybe you has my Amazon Perks up. Maybe you focus on what you can get for free through school, and try to reduce costs. Don't go to Starbucks every day, for example. Okay, so this is something that I want you to take a look at. So the more you take out, you need to make sure that you have the ability later on, based on what you're going to do for a living, to pay it back. So an attorney who takes out a $100,000 loan, right, for going to law school might make $6,000 a month. Okay. So for this attorney, that $1,110 payment over 10 years or $644 payment over 25 years, it's not that big of a deal. It's part of their budget. They can handle it. However, a teacher who takes out $100,000 loans, that $1,110 to $644 payment is going to really be a negative factor in their lifestyle. Okay. But a teacher takes out $30,000 loan, not as big of a deal, right? So this might be the difference between, taking out a loan and getting a teacher degree at Rollins versus UCF, right? You need to make sure that you know what your future income is going to be in order to, regulate how much you can handle in student loans. Okay. It's important to know what your starting salary may be. Here are some good websites to check that out based on what you want to major in. When you're paying for college, there's a few different ways you could pay. You have federal grants. That's like a Pell Grant. That's free money. You don't have to pay back. Those are great. And that's based on your financial need. State grants could be grants like the Bright Future Scholarship, which tend to be merit-based. Private organization grants. So if you got a Rotary Club scholarship or one from your church, some private money, that's great. Anything that's a scholarship or a grant, free money. You want to take all of that, you can get. Employer grants, maybe you work for a company that says, we're going to pay, if you're a full-time employee, like Disney has a program that if you're a full-time employee with Disney, you can go to college for free. If you're a UCF employee, you get to go to college for free. Those are all great. Other federal support could be student loans, right? If you are, let's say, going into the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps, or the GI Bill for a veteran, those are other parts of federal support to help pay for college, and of course, student loans. Lots of different payment plans for loans. There's loan forgiveness programs. So for example, let's say you work for a nonprofit or you're in education. If you make 10 years of monthly payments consistently, you can have your student loans paid off. That's a loan forgiveness program for educators, for example. And you want to make sure you know your rights, right? You want to know how to consolidate loans. So if you have multiple loans together, and I would definitely talk to a financial planner or a financial aid officer about what your different rights are. You want to make sure you maintain financial aid too. So especially for Bright Futures, there's GPA requirement in order to keep your loan or keep your scholarship. You want to make sure you're staying in good standing and you know what you need in order to stay in good standing. If you have extra financial aid money, what do you do with that? You can either pay it back early, invest it. That's something that you can decide based on how much it is and what your strategy is. Okay, now we're on to online security. I would suggest getting something like LifeLock, which is a company that helps protect identity theft. If you get scammed, make sure you know what phishing emails are, all of that. Passwords and security, you're not supposed to use the same password on everything. If you do get identity theft, you have to change all your passwords. Use something like Google Password Manager to help you out. Don't give, information to people who contact you. Shred everything you can before throwing it away if it has personal information, and get a free credit report every year. Don't go to freecreditreport.com. Experian, for example, you can get a free credit report once a year. So you can see what they have on you, your credit history, and all the accounts you have opened up in with your Social Security number. These are some great websites to go to if you have any questions about credit scores or financial education. These are the 4 questions we asked at the beginning. Hopefully you're able to think about some of those throughout this presentation. Okay, that is it for chapter 8 and 10. We only have 2 chapters left, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Let me know if you have any questions.